exception of one of our CAG co-chairs, Mr. Ed Washington. So
I spoke to Ed. Ed is out of the country.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he's going to join us.
Very well. Okay, thank you. I believe he can be excused. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's meeting. Good morning. Today is December 16th, 2022. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and I welcome everyone to the December IBR Executive Steering Group meeting. I'll read a few instructions for you so that we can make sure that those who are viewing are able to access the information with ease. So closed captions are going to be available in English and in Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link below. It's https://ibr.news/captions. To view in both English and Spanish in a separate browser window. To access closed captions, first, at the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. Click on the CC icon and a separate window with captions will appear. A few participation tips. We encourage panelists to turn on your video. Please keep your audio on mute when you're not speaking. Before speaking, please state your name and affiliation to help attendees identify who is talking. And if you experience technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. A few ground rules. We are going to honor the agenda. We ask that you listen to understand and ask questions to clarify. We're going to be hard on the problems and soft on the people. We're going to address interests and seek common ground. And we're going to provide a balance of speaking time. Our agenda for today is as follows. We are in the process of going through our welcome and acknowledgements. We will ask for partner updates at the conclusion of my instructions. We're going to then have a conversation about the Interstate Bridge Replacement Cost Estimate. We'll then talk about our partner conditions, which were a part of the Modified Locally Preferred Alternative. We will then have the program administrator's update, public comment, and closing statements, and confirmation of upcoming meetings and upcoming topics. Please note that we've adjusted the agenda a bit. The update from the administrator is going to come at the latter part of the meeting because we wanted to make sure that we had ample time to discuss the two areas of concern that we have listed first. And so now we will ask that each of our program participants provide for us an update on what's going on in your neck of the woods. I will call off each participant and ask that you unmute yourself and then provide for us a few updates. It's been a while since we've been together. And so I'm looking forward to hearing about all the good things that are going on. I know the public is looking forward to hearing it as well. And then we will move on into the agenda. So first, we'll ask that Director Chris Strickler from the Oregon Department of Transportation join us for a few words.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here today. I want to wish everybody a happy holiday, whatever holiday you choose to celebrate over the next several weeks and months. It's an exciting time right now with a lot of things going on. As you can imagine, we're in the middle of kind of transition and a few other things. Nothing major to report from our last discussion, other than it's great to see everybody, and I appreciate your willingness to come and have a discussion on a Friday in the middle of December for this program. Thank you very much. Pleasure to see everybody. Thanks, Millicent.
Thank you, Director Strickler. And now we'll have from the Washington Department of Transportation, Secretary Roger Millar.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. Happy holidays. We're busy up in Washington State. I think we're always busy, but it seems like busier than ever just now. The governor released his budget earlier this week, and it calls for continued investment in transportation infrastructure, a focus on safety, and a focus on housing. So we're very involved in the nexus between transportation and housing, and quite active in that space. We are also getting ready for the legislative session that starts in January, and updating our schedules and estimates, and addressing the issues that our good friends at the state legislature want to see addressed as they set policy and appropriation. So keeping everybody hopping. Hope everybody else is having a good December, and looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Secretary Millar. Now from the City of Portland, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty.
Good morning, everyone. I guess my announcement is that this will be my last meeting as part of this group as the City of Portland's representative. And so because of that, I just want to say thank you. This has been really critical work for this region. I am really proud of everyone around this table. Any of you who know me well know I'm not going anywhere, because just because I don't have a title doesn't mean the IBR project is not near and dear to me, and absolutely has to be done, and done well, and done to benefit those of us who are here today. So yeah, you won't see me at this table, but you will certainly see me as we continue to move this work forward. So it's been a pleasure and an honor to be part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. We'll now hear from Mayor Ann McInerney-Ogle from the City of Vancouver.
Good morning, everyone. And again, Joanne, thank you for all of your work for these many years on the project. We were recently in Washington, D.C., and as we like to say, we saw 4 representatives, 3 smiling senators, and 1 granting agency with a partridge in a pear tree. And they came from both sides of the river, and that U.S. Department of Transportation staff were very excited. The universal message coming out of that was great support for the project, but also a very strong push for us to grab that federal funding, those funding packages while they're still available, to aim high and get going on it. But it also helped us remember that we need to be spreading that message back here and in a very positive light. While we know we have some difficult conversations ahead of us, we should be celebrating the fact that we landed light rail in Southwest Washington, for example, and we're moving this project forward bits and pieces at a time. But also we're looking forward to the opportunity, probably January, February, March, on developing all of those community benefit agreements that we have been discussing and working on that design to make it iconic. We know that, but kind of the bottom line is, let's ramp up the sizzle and get going on this and start sharing all of the excitement about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mayor Ann. Now we'll hear from the Executive Director of the Southwest Washington Regional Transportation Council, Matt Ransom.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. Happy holidays. I'd like to share just a legislative piece. RTC Board of Directors, like many agencies here, both at this table and across the region, recently adopted a legislative statement for Clark County, but it's not just Clark County. We refer to it as a Clark County Transportation Alliance statement. This helps us attune both state and members of Congress what our legislative priorities are. I mentioned it's not just Clark County. There are about a dozen associations and public agencies in the state of Oregon who also sign on to this legislative statement, including the Port of Portland. Thank you. Let me just refer to action number 1. Action number 1 in the statement this year is support timely I-5 bridge replacement. And sub-activities include support the supplemental EIS, support by state legislative consensus, and support funding commitments. So each year we do this in Clark County. We seek other partners across the river. I want to encourage partners at this table to use it in their outreach. And I think, again, it speaks to what our priority is, which is to all lean in together to support the development of this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we'll hear from our Metro Council President, President Lynn Peterson.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to also extend my sincere gratitude for Commissioner Hardesty's steadfastness to this process and this project. It may be a Portland to Vancouver bridge, but it's actually a full West Coast issue. And without the two cities and the two regions coming together, we wouldn't be where we are. And so I guess I will just say where I think our council is at is that they are very supportive of the supplemental EIS as is. Really don't want any proposed changes to that might be circulating around. So I'm just putting a marker down that this is a really good negotiation at the local level that meets a lot of needs. And again, I've always said we won't be able to meet everybody's 100% perfect. And is there really ever the perfect? So much appreciated to getting to this point. We have to hold steadfast to it because there are a lot of forces that would like to see something changed, and that would just have ripple effects across the entire region. So that, and I just want to also say I would love to see the community benefits agreement work get going ASAP. It's hard work. It takes a long time to really get to the specifics and make sure that we're making a big impact. So we'd like to see how that can move forward as quickly as possible, and how Metro can help with any of that work with our C2, P2 experience and program. So thank you, everybody. Much appreciated. We will continue to work with you to see this through to get the funding.
Thank you so much, President Peterson. Now we'll hear from General Manager Sam Dessou from TriMet.
Thank you, Millicent, and everyone. Good morning. Commissioner Hardesty, we just all want to thank you for your service to the city, to this region, actually. Really appreciate that. And I know that you're not going away, so we'll definitely be in contact with you as that. TriMet has been very busy as well. As Mary Ann stated, you could go back to JPAC, having the meetings in Washington, D.C., thanking them for the federal assistance that they provided the region, all the way to the launch of TriMet's first frequent express bus line. We celebrated that with all of our local partners, also our national partners, and we had the record-breaking DBE milestone that was there. Our Better Red project is progressing very well right now. The crews have made major progress in constructing 2 new light rail bridges, and they've moved special trackway and relocating utilities right now. So we really appreciate the help from all of you, and especially Metro there. We are excited about the modified LPA and working with you to build a bridge. I think we're all there for that, and really appreciate the partnership about the rail expansion into Vancouver as the option to work with Sean and his team with Express Bus as well. We've made several improvements with our customer experience here. We've added 215 real-time arrival digital displays across our system. We've done a website redesign here at TriMet, and we're trying to increase our presence on board. So we've doubled the number of our customer safety supervisors, and also we've doubled the number of our safety response team members who help people connect with social services. And then finally, I just want to let everybody know, for the first time since COVID-19, we've surpassed 1 million weekly boardings on our vehicles. And that's really a positive sign that the region is slowly recovering from the significant impacts of the pandemic. So it's really great, and a lot of work with you, and really appreciate the partnerships.
Thank you so much, General Manager Dessou. Now we will hear from CEO Sean Donahue from CTran.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Would like to echo the comments and appreciate Commissioner Hardesty's work on the ESG and other committees that I've had the opportunity to work with her on. So thank you for that. I wanted to take a minute to say thanks and congratulations to my friend Sam at TriMet for the FX launch. We were able to be there on day one with the CTran team, and what an amazing day that was. I think that's going to be one of the most successful bus rapid transit lines in the nation. So I'm excited to see what the future of that holds. And I would also share the mayor's comments about some community benefit identifiers that we're going to get out as a function of this project. I think those are important when we're really trying to have a conversation about what does this project mean to neighborhoods? What does this project mean to the individual community member? And those are of chief concern for CTran, but also the city as well. So we echo the mayor's comments there. At CTran, just a couple things that are going on. We're a little bit ahead of schedule on our Mill Plain BRT construction. We're hoping to shore that up a little sooner than we had thought. It all is going to depend on how the winter goes for construction. Right now, we've been very fortunate to have a pretty decent fall, so things are moving pretty nicely. We are in design and engineering on our Highway 99 BRT, which will be our third BRT line that we anticipate starting construction, hopefully very shortly after, if not right after, the completion of Mill Plain BRT. And we're also going to extend our original Fourth Plain BRT about another 5 to 7 miles from the original location ending point at Van Mall. So we'll once we get all of those completed, we'll move into the next phase of what our high capacity transit looks like. So there's a lot going on over at CTran right now. I'm just pleased with the work that's done on the ESG, and I know the staff at IBR continues to give out as much information as they can in real time. The only thing I might add is now that the cost estimate is out, I would say at some point in time, and I think it was brought up at the bi-state, that we'd love to see that broken down into segments of the bridge piece as a standalone, what is in the interstate bridge influence area, and then what transit is, and sort of break those down by the cost of those independent items and where they anticipate getting money to generate for those specific three things. And I know that the team has committed to looking into doing, seeing how they can do that. And so anxious to see when that'll be completed. But other than that, just appreciate the hard work and looking forward to meeting today.
Thanks so much, CEO Donaghy. And now we'll hear from the Port of Portland State Affairs Manager, Ivo Trummer.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm here on behalf of Curtis Robinholt, who sends his regrets he couldn't be here this morning. First, on behalf of the Port, Commissioner Hardesty, I want to also appreciate and thank you for your service. Really appreciated what you've done for transportation and for our community here in the last few years. As far as the project goes, no substantive update from the Port of Portland, but building on the holiday wishes, I just want to point out if you're planning to fly out of PDX this holiday season, it will be incredibly busy, especially if you're flying out between 5 and 9 a.m. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get there, to park if you're parking, and to get through security. It will be busy, but regardless where you spend your holidays, I hope you have a great holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivo. And yes, we will we will keep your recommendation in mind. We'll now hear from the Port of Vancouver. Standing in for CEO Marler, we have Commissioner Jack Berkman.
Good morning and happy holidays. Yes, Juliana sends her regrets she's not able to attend. If you want to know what's going on at the port, come across the bridge and you'll see 2 tower cranes as our 2-block building is going vertical. That is the future home of Zoom Info and about 3,000 employees. That's all part of our Terminal 1 development. The hotel is doing very well, and the extension of the Renaissance Trail that occurs on the port property has been already used quite a bit by the public. If you were down there for Christmas lights on the ships, there are people all over. So it's working really well there. We're looking forward to the analysis of the auxiliary lane options over the next few months, and are also looking forward to re-engaging the freight community and making sure that the IBR and this Terminal 1 project of ours work together as this project moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Berkman. And now we will hear from one of our CAG co-chairs representing Washington, Lynn Ballinger.
Good morning and thank you. I want to echo the rest of the committee's thanks for the true joy that it's been working with Joanne over these past, I guess it's been several years now. So Thank you for your passion and your advocacy. It's really been a treat. Peg has not actually met since we had our last meeting, so I don't have anything further to update, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, CAG co-chair, Lynn Ballinger. And now we will move on in our agenda. I'm sorry, before we do that, I see that Director Strickler has his hand raised.
Yeah, Millicent, thank you. I did not want to make any comment in advance of Commissioner Hardesty, but now that she has spoken for herself, Commissioner, I'm turning directly to your box on my screen. And I want to tell you personally and professionally, thank you. Thank you for the partnership. Thank you for all that you've done for transportation in the region. And candidly, thank you for the relationship that we've developed. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in whatever endeavor you choose to take on.
Thank you so much. If there are no other comments, we will advance the agenda.
So
And I'm
Melissa, if I can take a brief moment to speak for the IBR team and also thank Commissioner Hardesty for her service on this team and helping us get to consensus to move this program forward. Without your help, this thing would not be where we're at. So I want to express my personal appreciation and appreciation of our team for the hard work that you've put in. So thank you, and look forward to seeing the next iteration of Joanne Hardesty.
Thank you for that, Greg, and thank you all for your kind words. Yes, we will be talking soon, all of us. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and real quick to introduce our next segment, and this is the reason we reconfigured our agenda is to make sure we have enough time for questions and the deep dive into our estimate process. We've taken the last 2.5 months and done a deep dive, and this is a part of our financial plan that we will be publishing in probably February. But we wanted to get these numbers out to you guys and out to the public so folks understand what the potential cost of this program is. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the experts who have done the deep dive. I'll turn it over to Frank Green and Ray Mabey along with Brent Baker. So jump in, guys.
Thank you, Greg, and as Greg and everyone said, thank you also everyone I'd like to thank all the partners who also have helped us move forward with an understanding of what we should be looking to estimate here. Next slide, please. So we wanted and we gave a very similar presentation. In fact, I think these are the same slides we used on Monday, but we wanted, as Greg said, to kind of reformat the agenda just in case there were some questions. And as we talk cost estimates, we wanna share where we've been up until this point with cost estimates, and then kind of speak to a little bit of what's changed, what's different, and what this new estimate is. So currently, before the estimate that we have right now, we had been speaking to a conceptual plan and a conceptual estimate that we developed, really heavily based on some of the information from the previous program. That the estimate was developed for that conceptual finance plan in late 2020. So the estimate was inflated to what our target schedule is. It was in what we call year of expenditure dollars, meaning if construction is targeted to begin in 2025, 2026, that's when the estimate was shown. But this new estimate will be based on the modified locally preferred alternative that we worked with all of you to get to endorsement on this summer. So like Greg said, we've really been trying to spend some time as a program team understanding what the modified locally preferred alternative meant from a scope perspective, so that we could then develop a cost estimate for it. Next slide, please. So real quick, the process that the program chose to use to develop the estimate is a process, a risk-based estimate process that has been developed by WSDOT, but is used, I think, more broadly. It may be called different things by different agencies, but it is a process that allows the team to build a cost estimate, based on the scope of work, but also have an understanding of what are some of the potential, risks that a program like this may encounter as it goes through completing design, completing program development, moving into the next phase that might be acquisition of right of way if there is any, or moving into construction. And because we all know that as you go through that process, there are sometimes things that could delay schedule, or that there might be an unknown that where we're at design right now is that we find that may add cost. So we try to bring in a group of experts to really look at what are all those range of potential risks. And you see on the slide here, some of the categories that those risks could be in, as I mentioned, are things that could delay schedule. Because schedule, obviously, if it gets pushed out with some of the inflation and the market conditions we see, could add some significant cost. There's a lot of construction going on in the Pacific Northwest. So what's the availability of labor and materials? We try to incorporate that into the estimating procedure that we do. But ultimately, we really try to get that cost estimate, as I said, into what our best known understanding of the schedule is right now, trying to target, construction beginning late 25, 26, so that we have a good understanding of the year of expenditure of the cost estimate. So next slide, please. Really wanted to kind of cover, as I said, this new cost estimate is based on the new modified locally preferred alternative. So when we say base cost estimate, what that means is, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, we're looking at, with the modified LPA, a replacement bridge over the Columbia River, a replacement of the North Portland Harbor Bridge, one aux lane both directions, as the modified LPA, had identified an extension of light rail from its current terminus at Expo, onto the bridge into Vancouver, the station at the terminus now being at the Evergreen location with new stations along the way, and interchange improvements. And we took all of that scope, and we developed a cost estimate. And as I said, we identified a range of project-specific risks based on that scope, that modified locally preferred alternative. And then we model that into our program schedule to get a year of expenditure cost. And that's the updated cost estimate that we have. Next slide. So with that, as I had previously mentioned, that the cost on the conceptual finance plan for the light rail option was close to about the 4.8 end of the range with light rail before. And we see now that the base estimate from this recent model with this CVIP run has a $5 to $7 billion range. Want to explain that range in this cost risk assessment type approach, what it means. So as I had mentioned, we identify risks, but we also try to identify the probability or the magnitude that we think some of those risks may have. And so 5 billion in the range is really the number that, if we're able as a program team, as working with our partners, as the ESG committee, if we're able to really come up with strategies to avoid all of those potential risks that we identified, and really mitigate any effects of them, that's the lower end of this range. The upper end of the range is if all of the risks that we've identified that could impact schedule, could add cost, occur, and we're not able to manage away from them or develop strategies to avoid them, that would be kind of the highest cost that we see with this risk base. But we also see from this effort, we develop what we call a risk management strategy for these risks to say, how are we able to avoid some of these? And that's where we come up with the most likely cost being $6 billion. So $6 billion is the cost estimate for the program right now that as a team working on this risk-based approach that we feel we can really actively manage risks to and can complete construction of the modified locally preferred alternative with that being the most likely cost. Now, we also recognize, as I said, this is the range for the modified locally preferred alternative, but we do know that some of the conditions and some of the discussions that have been had for the program, we're asking the program to move forward the modified locally preferred alternative, but still study a few other design options. And so, as you see, we did run scenarios in this risk-based estimating process that will look at and be able to help us understand what the risk profile or the cost profile for some of these other design options are, such as auxiliary lanes, the potential to go from one that is in the modified locally preferred alternative to look at maybe an additional aux lane in both directions. We know that there's a discussion about maybe active multi-use of the dedicated guideway for the high capacity transit. And so what would the cost of going to what's called embedded track rather than like a direct fixation track that may allow for a future use of either EMS vehicles onto the facility or even potentially in the future buses. So that's the scenario that we ran. And then also there was a discussion about at the terminus location at Evergreen, what does the transit station look like? What's the design of that? So as we are able to finalize these reports and get them out, we will be able to provide the detail, I think, CEO Donaghy, that you asked for. At this point, we were really trying to get to the range so that we had an understanding of the magnitude of cost. And we will definitely be able to, in the near future, as the reports are developed and finalized, be able to provide more detail. And that'll be coming early next year with that report being drafted and finalized. So I'm going to pause for just a minute. I do have a couple more slides that get into a little bit of maybe why the costs increased from our previous number, but I wanted to pause to see if there were questions about the CVIP process or the information that we've shared to this point.
If anyone has questions, if you'd please raise your hand.
Well, how about I'll get through my next two slides and then we'll see if there's more questions. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I think one of the questions we knew as we were getting some of these early results that we might get asked is, what are some of the reasons that we saw the cost increase from that 2020 conceptual finance plan to this updated estimate? One of the things that we're really seeing, and I kind of highlighted it when we talked about some of the risk, potential risk categories. But we do see high inflation rates right now, and what high inflation rates for a program like this mean is that the material cost to procure materials and have them delivered, we've really seen an increase in some of those costs since our previous estimate. And we're trying to track what the market conditions are going to do, especially as I had mentioned, we're putting these costs into their year of expenditure. So, if construction were to begin in late 25 or early 26, that means, what do we think the market's going to do 2 or 3 or 4 years from now as we're moving into construction? We also, as we were going through this process, have noted, as I said, there's a lot of work being planned for the Pacific Northwest construction-wise, in and around this same time frame, both regionally and from a state perspective, and so availability of workforce and competition amongst the programs within the region and within the states are going to have some impact potentially on cost bids and cost. And so we also have some changes in scope from that previous program that we've discussed as we were going through the modified local for alternative. One example is the North Portland Harbor Bridge for I-5. In the previous program, the North Portland Harbor Bridge had been deemed to be seismically retrofitted, and knowing that we're a few years further down the line, this current estimate does include showing replacing that bridge. There's differences within a lot of the scope with the interchanges, but also with light rail. So we wanted to make sure that this estimate accounted for the difference. For example, in light rail in the previous program, it went through downtown Vancouver, and in the current discussion, it stays elevated along I-5 until it gets to Evergreen. And so we saw that there's a difference in cost in that, with the station locations and with the added bridges. But also, as I mentioned, the interchanges, I think on both sides of the river, as we're trying to figure out how to integrate and really how to avoid, minimize any impacts, have added some costs as we're looking at the partial interchange, for example, on Hayden Island, and some of the new development, for example, in Washington. So those are kind of the main reasons we've seen the cost estimate go up a little bit. And if I can go to the next slide, this is hitting to that first bullet on the previous slide.
Millicent.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
That's
Go ahead,
okay.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Could we go back to the last slide, please? And so I want to challenge some of the assumptions around this slide about why the estimate has been increased. Because if I remember, the change in scope for the ramp connections and a partial interchange at Hayden Island was cited as an element. You cited that as an element for a cost increase, but this is a partial interchange with a much smaller footprint. And so so could you explain to me why you are, this is radically different and it's much smaller. So, and even though it's a decade later, I challenge if that is an accurate statement about that being a reason why for cost increase.
So yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner Hardesty, and I can definitely expand upon that. One of the elements of the partial interchange on Hayden Island is that it does have a smaller footprint on the island from the standpoint of the connections to and from Hayden Island. But one of the elements that in order to make it work operationally with the Marine Drive interchange that does need to be included is what we refer to as the braided ramp between Marine Drive and Victory. So there's because of the close proximity between Marine Drive and Victory Boulevard, with putting this added traffic from Hayden Island into that complex, we have to add the braided ramp between Marine Drive and Hayden Island, which does have a pretty significant cost to it. It's a braided ramp that's on a bridge, and when we walk through some of the slides here in a little bit, we can show more detail on what we mean by that. But on Hayden Island, the footprint's smaller, but from a cost estimate perspective, in order to make some of those operations work, we did have to add other elements in and around Marine Drive that actually did, we see an added cost.
Well, I appreciate that, but I want to push back a little bit and say the CRC also had active transportation and a local bridge included in it. So, I mean, some of us have been around way too long. And so I just don't want you to create problems for yourself by implying something that may or may not actually pencil out to be accurate.
Yeah, and I would like to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted someone.
And Frank, I guess as CEO Sean Donahue asked for is a breakdown of costs, and that's work ahead of us. So these are some indicators and change in scope that we believe could contribute to this. We've got the work to do to dig into it. When you do reduce movements from the partial interchange on Hayden Island, that pushes a lot of those movements to Marine Drive and all that traffic. So Marine Drive If we had a full interchange on Hayden Island, Marine Drive would be a slightly different configuration. With that extra traffic, you have to accommodate it. And I think that's what Frank is talking about is we've had to accommodate that, make some additions. We've got to understand that balance of cost between those two better. And so this is just one of the things we noted as a change. How it proves out, partial or full on the cost spectrum is work that's ahead of us. So yeah, I think you've raised a fair point for us to look at.
So the last slide that I had before I turn it over to Brent Baker to help describe some of the potential sources is a cost source.
Before you continue, Frank, before you continue, Ivo here, I think we lost Secretary Millar over on the attendee side. Whoever, yeah, thank you.
Okay,
thanks.
He's been asked to be re-promoted. He had to restart his computer, so he should be rejoining momentarily.
Okay, thank you. And this is just a slide that I wanted to highlight that that kind of shows the volatility right now and some of the materials that are needed to build projects and for construction and really to show what they've been doing lately, because that's one of the drivers for why the estimate has one of the drivers why the estimate has increased. You see a series of different construction materials here. Lumber and plywood is generally used for formwork, for example. But with lumber and plywood, it went up really high in 21, but then it came back down, but then we saw it going back up. And so as we're trying to identify what costs might do as we get to construction, a few years from now, we need to take into account what we're seeing as far as material availability, but also some of the inflation we're seeing here. One item that isn't shown on this chart, but that a transportation project does have is for example, like oil, with the price of oil needed for things like asphalt or use of construction equipment. We do see that since that 2020 timeframe, there's been a pretty substantial increase for a lot of materials that are needed, and that is accounted for in the updated cost estimate that we have. So just wanted to highlight those things. The next slide that we have I'll turn over to Brent Baker, who's our financial structure lead on the team, to give a sense, since we have this cost estimate range between 5 and 7, with the most likely being the estimate that we're really planning to manage toward. I wanted Brent to be able to walk through some of the potential sources, and then cover a little bit about some of the economic impact analysis that we've done with some of this information. So Brent.
Great, thanks, Frank. Good morning, everybody. Brent Baker. So we've got to looking at these costs, we're looking at, or we're assembling the sources of funds, but ultimately with the goal of putting together our financial plan here early in the new year. And there are a number of funding sources that we're looking at. Obviously, some of them have already been committed. The first 3 lines of this table represents about $1.2 billion of funding that has been secured. And of course, then we anticipate the Oregon legislature hopefully moving forward with a similar $1 billion contribution to match what Washington did earlier this year in 2023. So that leaves some of the other funding sources that we're looking at, and we've kind of expressed them as ranges, where the high end of those ranges are sort of the optimistic views on that. I'm going to start with the federal grants. The program has already applied for a FHWA Bridge Investment Program grant. In fact, we received a $1 million planning grant, and we've applied for a $750 million large bridge grant that we're waiting to hear on. And that's a discretionary grant. And similarly, we will be in 2023 applying for a mega grant, which is the national project. Oh, I forget the acronym. I'm sorry. Anyway, in the mega grant, we're asking for another $750 million there as a high-end target on that one. So with a few other federal discretionary grants thrown in later in the program financial planning horizon. You see that our range goes up to about 1.6 billion on the federal grants. For the and then for FTA New Starts funding, this is the transit specific federal grants. We're seeking a capital investment grant there in the range of 900 million to 1.1 billion. So that then leaves the toll funding contribution here, and we're showing that as being between $1.25 and $1.6 billion. We are in the process of conducting a level 2 toll traffic and revenue study, and the net toll revenues from that will be analyzed by financials professionals at the state DOTs and the respective state treasurers' offices to give us a more firm handle of the financial capacity of toll funding. So this is a placeholder amount right now that's kind of based on some of the earlier work from the CRC days and the prior TNR work, but we believe that we should see similar toll funding capacity out of the current traffic and revenue work that is just in process right now. So all told, we're looking at between about 5.2 and 6.5 billion in funding, including those ranges that will be needed and that we're targeting for this. And again, we're working right now in kind of this unprecedented federal funding opportunities that we have at present. We are working to maximize the federal contribution for the program. So on the next slide, I'd kind of like to talk about, we've got the funding and we've heard about the cost estimate. So we have some good news around all of that, in a sense of, taking on a project like this is good for the local economy. And so we have just completed a preliminary construction economic impact analysis. And you might ask, well, what is that and why are we doing it? An economic impact analysis basically answers that question about what bang for the buck do we get by investing in and constructing the IBR program. And specifically, how will it change our bi-state regional economic activity and incomes generated? How many jobs will the IBR create and sustain over the construction period? And what are what aspects of that and how do different funding sources contribute to those impacts? I do want to say that it is it differs a bit from an economic benefit cost analysis. The economic impact is really focused on how construction expenditures ripple through the local economy. Once the project's completed, those benefits will typically be measured with a benefit cost analysis, which focuses kind of on the individual and societal benefits, economic benefits generated by the project as its operations relative to not having it. And we will also be able to talk about those sorts of things in the future. We will be updating our benefit cost analyses for the grant applications that we'll be pursuing in 2023. So the next slide sort of covers a bit about the process of how construction economic impacts are generated. The expenditures themselves represent the direct impact. So that is basically the contract amounts for employing engineers, construction workers, and all those involved in directly delivering the program. Then there are indirect impacts because those folks or those people have to purchase inputs in terms of labor and material and supplies to do that. So for instance, a concrete contractor would need to purchase aggregate from a quarry and in order to prepare that concrete. And so all of those sort of input purchases that go into the construction comprise that indirect impact. And those are both materials and labor and salaries associated with that labor. And so then finally, there is sort of the tertiary impact that takes a look at for the jobs that are created from the direct and indirect impacts, those job earnings or salaries, if you will, are spent on goods and services throughout the local regional economy. And as those expenditures occur across all sectors, they have additional multiplied impacts, which we refer to as the tertiary impacts here. So the next slide will kind of just summarize where all this is headed. Essentially, for the $6 billion program cost that you heard Frank mention, the total economic activity generated within the region is nearly double that. And if we look at sort of what would be the minimum net new economic activity, that is the amount of economic activity that is derived from the federal funding that we are anticipating that would otherwise, but for this project, not exist. That is over 3.8 billion in new economic activity that is sort of uniquely attributed to this project because of the federal funding that it will bring. Looking at this on the job side, in terms of employment, we measure those in person-year jobs. So a job that is sustained or created by the program that lasts for 4 years equates to 4 person-year jobs. So over the course of the construction period, we expect the IBR program to directly employ nearly 19,000 person-year jobs. And looking at those multiplied impacts, those indirect and tertiary impacts across the regional economy, that amounts to close to 44,000 person-year jobs overall. And then finally, kind of that net employment that if we look at just what's attributed to the federal funding that otherwise wouldn't be coming to this region, it's still an incredible 14,400 person-year jobs. Finally, just will note that as the IBR scope and cost estimates are refined, we will continue to update the construction economic impact analysis. And then maybe I'll just pause and see if there are any questions.
Do we have any of the ESG members who would like to pose questions to either Brent, Frank, or Ray? Commissioner Hardesty. You're on mute.
Had to do that at least once before.
One more time.
Yeah, one more
for the
time.
road.
Yeah, for the road. Could you go back to the last slide, please? I think it was 17. One more. Must have been 16. So this one. This is the one I was looking for. Thank you. 15. So my question is really around the estimate for the toll funding. You said that this was a placeholder from the CRC estimates from back when? Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct, Commissioner Hardesty.
Okay. So I would highly recommend there be a note on this slide that says there's nothing new about that, like some note that just actually acknowledges, maybe it's on there and I didn't see it. I guess my concern is that the other numbers are updated based on what we know, and that number isn't. And so it gives, for me, it presents a false picture of what we think is going to happen. And so that's one question. Then the second question is this forever, or is there a time limit on when we would reach the 1.6 billion and therefore something different would happen with tolling?
No, Commissioner, I'll jump in, Brent, and then you can help. You can maybe add the second part. But Commissioner Hardesty, yeah, there is a note at the bottom that we wanted to make sure that we had a range of toll funding on here. We do know that we're currently in the process of updating and doing a level 2 toll traffic and revenue study, and that information will be available early next year. But this is information that is based on some of the work that was done on CRC and then updated with our 2022 conceptual finance plan. We did look at kind of that initial how much of the previous work can we still look at and use and assume. may be available. And so we recognize that's why we have a range here that shows this 1.25, 1.6 million. The 1.25 and 1.6 were something that were in the conceptual finance plan previously, based on the work that we had tried to update to 2020. But fully recognize and agree with your comment that early next year, as we're able to get that level 2, we'll be able to refine these numbers, refine this range a little bit more, and understand if there's potential for additional revenue from the mall now, or if that number needs to be modified. But we understand your question, and we have a note here that is consistent, but maybe need to do a little bit more explaining on that. So appreciate the comment. And then as far as the second one, Brent, I'll let you weigh in on as far as this assumption goes, the understanding of timing.
Yeah, just to clarify a little bit on that. So the total funding contribution shown here is a range, and it is the assumed capital funding that would be brought from financing against future net toll revenues over a period of decades. So this is what we could borrow sort of upfront, combined with some of the revenues that would be collected from pre-completion tolling of the existing bridge. And this range does assume that pre-completion tolling of the existing bridge. And finally, I would just offer that the traffic on the I-5 bridge has shown very good recovery from the pandemic. It is almost back at pre-pandemic levels. And the forecasts that we're seeing for net revenues in the current TNR study are very comparable to those that we saw in the earlier work. So we have some pretty good confidence that we should see a similar toll funding range, but of course that work is yet forthcoming with the treasurer's offices in both states.
Thank you for that. But when will we know what the exemption will be for tolling? And will that be informing you as to what the projections are? Because I guess I'm concerned that we have different folks doing different things at different times, and everything is interconnected. And so I know that there is a study, or there's a group that's actually looking at tolling and how it's going to impact low-income folks. I know that there is a necessity to have an exemption program as well as a low-income program. And so I just want to make sure that as you're doing the projections, that is informing those projections. I see Matt has his hand up, so he probably has the answer to this question.
Well, as we do, Commissioner Hardesty, if I could address that, yes, ODOT is looking at low income and other potential exemptions and discounts for ODOT's toll program, and IBR team is watching that very carefully. As we are a bi-state program, whatever toll exemptions, discounts we apply need to be something that's agreed to by both commissions, because those are the bodies that do this. So as we watch that work in Oregon, and I think there's some similar work in Washington, our job is to then find a path between those two and hopefully bring the best of both. But that would be work that we'd start to have those discussions probably sometime next year. I know we're looking for toll authorization from Washington legislature to their commission, which will allow that active conversation to happen. So the timing, it's on our radar. We are watching it and watching ongoing work today. But thank you for the question.
Executive Director Ransom.
Yeah, thank you. Just two observations of commentary. Number one, just feedback for the administrator. We've been waiting for this moment in time to have an updated estimate. And I think around the MPO table, we sort of lose sight of, you did do an intermediate estimate as you report out of 4.8. We often are sort of looking back to our plans, which had sort of the 3 billion. And I think, in the public's eye, maybe many members of the MPO's eye, sort of there's this huge jump, which in fact wasn't the case. But I think it's important to point out that, right or wrong, or as sobering as your observations have been, time is not a friend of cost, right? And I think you've had a way of saying that, which is, you know, the more time we spend, the more costly it's going to be, which sort of focuses the mind and sort of focuses our attention. And I think it's important. Again, maybe not the most, I guess, positive comment, but I think helpful because it's instructive. So thank you for making those kind of comments. I think it just will help us in the days ahead. The other observation relates to the cost estimate and sort of the funding sources. And I know I've said this before, and I think partners around this table, certainly at the MPO table at RTC, want to see very aggressive push on the federal grant side. I think it's assumed based on the bipartisan infrastructure law that there is this real opportunity through both the bridge program, maybe the FTA CIG program, to really be aggressive. And so the encouragement certainly coming from the MPO table to the project is be aggressive. And I think, Brent, you might have said that just even a moment ago. And I just to convey and continue to convey that, because as we put the slices of the pizza or pie, whatever the metaphor might be, together, one, it's going to be changing and evolving. I think that's a given assumption. I think we can all recognize that. Two, probably nobody around this table has ever, from day one, had a project fully funded. Through the project development cycle, there's always this ebb and flow of dollar here, dollar there. And so we're putting this pizza pie together collectively, trying to make appropriate decisions, appropriate assumptions, like in the case of tolling, et cetera. But again, knowing that there is this opportunity at the federal level, just the advocacy around our table is be aggressive as possible. And if we don't get all the money that we're asking for, you know, we'll put the pie together in another way. But at least at this moment, be aggressive on the federal grant side. Thank you.
So if I can address those comments, first off, Matt, thank you. We have been, as we've looked at the numbers and understand the risk associated with inflation and cost escalation, our goal is to keep this project moving forward, keep it on schedule. That is one of the key things we can do to take that $6 billion number and reduce it further down. So yes, we are keenly aware of time not being our friend, and kicking the can down the road does not help this program stay within budget. But also we are trying to make sure that we are not skipping any steps, that we are administering the NEPA process in a way that is fully expected from all of the partners. So it's a great balancing act, but our team is up to it. They understand the challenge. And as far as being aggressive with the federal grants, I agree with you 1,000%. The old admonition, you have not because you ask not, we're going to be asking, and we're going to be asking for quite a bit, because this is an important corridor, not only locally, but regionally and nationally, and even internationally. So yes, I agree on both points. So thank you for those comments.
Thank you so much. I see that President Peterson's hand is raised.
Thank you. I would echo the comments to the north on being aggressive. I guess I just want to note to our legislative partners in Oregon, we don't have our local match in place. And I think it's really important to be able to get that local match in place as quickly as possible so that we can be aggressive on the federal funding. We need to show our commitment, one and done, right? We need to get through this legislative session with a successful commitment on the Oregon part so that we can combined go to the federal government and be clear, which also has direct implications for this region with the chips manufacturing work that's going on right now, because I believe that they will be looking at this project, they being the industry, and making sure that this region can make big decisions and can be that partner with them to be able to have an economic development commitment that's going on in order to be able to bring home that federal money as well. So I think there's a lot riding on getting our local commitments set in place and making sure that we're true to that, those outcomes that we all agree to. So I guess I just wanted to put that out there, that this is a bigger decision now than it was prior. There's a lot riding on it, and we all have to link arms and get smooth sailing so that we can get through these hard decisions and make sure that we can take advantage of a lot of opportunities.
Thank you, President Peterson. Any comments before we go on to Commissioner Hardesty from either of the leadership team, member of the leadership team?
Can I say amen?
Okay.
And actually, that's all I was going to say was amen. Oregon has to step up early and be really clear in order for our team to be able to go aggressively after those federal dollars. So I absolutely agree with that. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. Are there any other comments on this presentation, questions? Final statements from you?
I do think there were maybe 2 more slides for
Okay.
that Ray was going to present. So let Ray do those, and then we go to our next section.
Next item. All right, great.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Millicent. Good questions from the group today. As Frank and Brent have shared, this new program estimate, I think it's important, and the basis of it is important to understand about the risk register and the quantification of those risks that comes in, because as we manage to this new cost estimate, it's incumbent upon the team to do the things necessary to stay within that estimate. And that means active management of those identified risks, of continuing to update the risk register and find and discuss new risks that we hadn't before, address those as well in the same way. And so that risk mitigation process is going to be key, as well as updating the estimate using the CBIT process at either key milestones or annually, to make sure that we are watching how these risks are moving forward, that we're accounting for how we are addressing them as well. I think we heard some risks that were discussed by Frank, but here's some more that we see as some cost risks that we need to manage very carefully. And you're going to see many of these rely on either funds or schedule, but completing our NEPA work and getting through that process so we can move to permitting and construction. If there are potential legal challenges that are hit that impact schedule of the environmental process, that's another risk we're watching. As we just recently mentioned, those state matching funds are critical to leverage the federal grants, and delays in those could impact other funds and progression of the design work. Scope changes that come along that are unplanned for. We all know how that can impact projects. And then unknown or uncertain conditions. There's a lot of work we need to do in the river, on the banks. Typically, those unseen conditions are around what's under the ground. And so addressing those with some work like we proposed in the grant for the planning grant for the bridge improvement program grant to understand the soil conditions on Hayden Island better. Those types of things can help mitigate and address those risks and keep us on target. Other tools we can use are value engineering. I think that's a term that not many people know, and I heard Frank share some thoughts around a good way to explain that. So you can have a design innovation. If I have a retaining wall as an example, and you can use maybe a different wall that has a different type, or maybe a newer wall that could be cheaper. But value engineering brings in some critical thinking to look at the project and think about, well, how can I adjust the program so I don't need that wall at all? And I can use a slope, a natural slope, to minimize those costs. So value engineering is a tool that we would apply at a regular frequency. We'd also be looking for those innovations, just because value engineering says you don't need the wall if you do. How can we be smart about what we do? And then the construction constructability workshops, bringing in experts around how things are built that actually do that work to help inform us in our design process are going to be key to help make sure that we have this buildable and an efficient way to minimize construction costs. I do see a hand up, and so maybe I'll pause that.
Yes, President Peterson.
I was going to wait till the end of the next slide. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, let's go to the next slide, please. This estimate that we've just developed is part of a bigger set of work that we're doing. It does set a foundation that we can move into the financial plan. I know we had that conceptual finance plan in 2020. Now with the estimate that's based on the LPA that this group endorsed, now we need to build a financial plan around that. So that's more in depth than the list of potential funding sources you saw earlier. We anticipate that work being completed early next year, which will include the results of the level 2 traffic and revenue analysis that'll help us understand the range of toll revenue we could expect. As I mentioned a little bit before, the active risk management and ongoing estimating validation processes means that controlling costs and estimates is a dynamic process that we need to remain vigilant and focused in order to maintain our estimate range to make sure that we get the confidence of this group as well as our legislatures on how it can actively manage a project to its budget. As we do this and we move forward, we're going to continue to connect with this body, the legislature, our advisory groups, and the community so that it's transparent, that they know what we know, and we can provide that feedback that can help us move forward. So I'll pause there and see, I think we have
President Peterson.
Yeah.
Thanks. I guess I just wanted to, and I won't speak on behalf of the entire committee, but I think the reason there's not a whole lot of questions is twofold. One, we did receive a little bit of information prior to this and have an opportunity to talk to you guys individually and really suss this out. But two, I don't think any of us were surprised by the actual numbers, knowing the rate of inflation at this point and the impacts that was going to have over the last 10 years. I guess my question is if we could get down to some additional information as we go through the next 6 months of what a delay to the Oregon side of funding would do to the cost of the project. Just kind of, forecast that out of what that would add to the cost. The second thing I would ask is that in your list, I would like to specifically call out value engineering and practical design. And I think you're trying to get at that through the innovative design. Totally understand, but a lot of times, a lot of folks think that value engineering is basically engineering out the things that were the amenities that the public, the residents, the community asked for. And I think we want to be clear that that is not the case. This is about finding a different material that might do the same job, that might be cheaper right now. It might be, like you say, getting rid of a wall and just dealing with a natural slope. But I think, there's a history of value engineering getting rid of that which the community wanted the most. So let's be clear about that. And then on practical design, practical solutions, I think it's the difference to me than innovative engineering is that we take a really hard look at our standards, our default standards, and really question some of those things so that we can bring down the costs. I-90 up through the Cascades, I think was a good example of, being able to lower the design speed so that we could accommodate a less a tighter turn so we could avoid a huge amount of cost of creating a wall within the lake that we had no place to embed that wall to. So it would have done nothing good. So I just think looking at those assumptions, that's not exactly innovative to me. That's practical. I would appreciate both of those. And I know you guys are working in that direction. Just let's call it out and, give you the kudos that you deserve for looking at all of these things to keep the cost down. Because even if you find a way to reduce something by 50 million or 250 million out of a $6 billion budget, it's still 250 million of the taxpayer dollars that you're saving. So thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson. Those are great comments, and thanks for the the clarification on what value engineering is. I couldn't agree more. I think it's important to make that distinction about the purpose of that and what it is and isn't. And then, yes, practical design is, to me, it's critical thinking that we need to apply across our decision-making process. So again, thank you for that.
Thank you, President Peterson. I see Mayor Ann's hand is raised.
Thank you. And thank you, President Peterson, for pointing out the value engineering. We just want to make sure that we retain those pieces of the project that are important to us, and that the cost estimating process as it moves forward includes those assumptions that we were counting on. So we don't want to remove those pieces that are important to us so that we're not surprised as it comes down the process. So let's make sure we stay in close communication on all of those pieces and not make those assumptions that value engineering might have, especially for the investments that we've all put in so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ann. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I'm so glad I followed both Council President Peterson and Mayor Ann. Let me just say that I think you've made the case for why it's really critical that the community benefit table gets built so that community members are vested early and they understand how the community is going to benefit from this project. Those of us at this table, we are true transportation geeks. Most of the public is not. And it's really going to be important to have a community voice out there that's actually independently making sure that what we've promised the community can expect they're going to get as the return on this huge public investment. So I just think this presentation today just really reinforced that it is not something that we can do when we get time. It is something that is critical to building community support, both at the legislature as well as with our federal delegation, as well as with the broader community who's going to have to suffer through all these years of construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Are there any final comments? Greg, thank you.
Millicent, if I can jump in, we have a number of folks who want to comment, and I want to cover the community benefits discussion and give that update. So maybe I'll cover that. We can go to comments from the public, and if we have time, I can give the update, but most folks have heard some of it anyway. But on the community benefits, our team, led by our principal equity officer, John L. Bell, and his firm has been putting together the framework for the community benefits. So how we will staff the community benefits discussion, how we will invite folks to that table. It is right now being, we had conversation with equity staff in ODOT. We're going to be talking to the civil rights staff within WSDOT to get their input. And as we get all of that finalized, well, I shouldn't say finalized, in a draft form, we're then going to take it to the ESG for confirmation that this is where we want to go. We're looking at making the community benefits discussion be a subcommittee of this group of the executive steering group. And once again, make sure that the voices are heard and that we have great representation on both sides of the river. So we have been working on it. We need to get this final level of input from the DOTs. And we also have been talking to our federal partners who fully expect that there will be a community benefits discussion as a part of a project this large. So it's work is being done. We're hoping to have more information come January and hopefully start the process of inviting folks to the table in January and be ready for a late winter, early spring kickoff for the discussion and give it a full year to a year and a half to complete and wrap up that type conversation. So I'll take any questions or concerns on the community benefits where we're at on that issue.
Thank you. No, that's good news, Greg. I appreciate the update. I was concerned that that was kind of put on the back burner. And what I know, especially here at the city, I can only speak for the city, is that it's really going to be important to have that community voice, right? So thank you for that update.
Yeah. We are also reaching out, part of Espousal Strategies task is to reach out nationally and look at community benefits across the nation and understand and kind of put context around those things. So they're doing a very thorough job. And once again, we're hoping to have some more and better information and a framework come January. So I see.
I do see Matt Rand's hand is raised, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation and statement of schedule. Just to clarify, the community benefits conversation, is that different than the workforce conversation, sort of the we've heard many times around this table, and I truly believe this is the case, we're focusing on concrete, steel, sidewalks, transit, roadways, et cetera. But the real value, looking back at Brent's presentation of the economic impact, is the investment in people. The resources that are going to be in the community that are actually, or could be, I guess could be, is the statement, purpose for people. That's the law, that to me, I believe that's the transformative change outside of the infrastructure. I mean, certainly we need to replace 1915 infrastructure, but it's the investment in people that I think is the real value proposition. So is that different than CBA? And maybe just a comment or two on that process?
So we have taken the community benefits agreement and made it a separate discussion from the community workforce agreement, although there are some crosswalks that connect both of them together. So both DOTs are working on formats for community workforce agreements that would look at how labor in mega projects are to be approached. So that is a discussion that's a little bit longer time frame. We're looking at sometime in the spring to have that discussion started. But we're looking to both the DOTs to give us their formatting for that discussion as we move forward. But we know that looking at workforce training, looking at pre-apprenticeship programs, all of those things are going to be an important aspect of the IBR program. And so we are working with the DOTs and the local entities who have a expertise in that area to make sure we're getting these things on the table to be discussed.
President Peterson and then Commissioner Hardesty. And after that comment from Commissioner Hardesty, we're going to need to do a time check and an agenda reevaluation because we are getting close to the end of our time and we want to make sure we cover as much as we can. So President Peterson.
Thanks. Just a clarifying question, Greg. I guess I had expectations that we would have seated and started meeting that CBA committee by now. And so I understand the research and the conversations. When can we expect that to get going?
So once again, we're hoping that we will have an approved framework in January. And as soon as we get that approved framework, we will start moving that forward. So we will be reaching out to the individual ESG members to talk about that framework in January to make sure everyone has had a look at it. And then we'll put it in place and start recruiting the folks who will be sitting at that table. So we're hoping probably by the time we get through that process, it will be March before that first meeting. That's what we are anticipating.
Thank you, Administrator Johnson. Commissioner Hardesty, you've taken your hand down. I think your question has been answered. Okay, great. So this has been a robust and fruitful discussion, but it has in fact created an opportunity for us to reevaluate the agenda. And I'd like to ask the program administrator how he would like to proceed. I believe many of the things that you'd like to discuss in your update are just that, updates, and we can move through those fairly quickly. I do think it is important for us to at least address the partner conditions and how we're dealing with those. I don't think it needs a 30-minute discussion as is slated in the agenda, but certainly we want to talk about that. So how would you like to proceed, Administrator Johnson?
So I can quickly give the update on partner conditions. So as everyone knows, we received over 175 partner conditions, and we had a team led by Grace Cronican and Katie Belliconi to look at each of those and to have a back and forth with the partners to make sure we understood the intent of those. So that team worked through it. They put together work plans. And so 2/3 of the items that were put in front of us, we have work plans for. We've posted those on our website. We've talked back to each of the individual partner agencies that submitted them. So those things are being worked on. We know that there are more issues. The 1/3 remaining conditions, we are still working on how we integrate those, whether into the supplemental environmental impact statement process or other future processes that will address those issues. So I guess the key message is we are working with your teams to make sure that every condition that we received is being addressed in a comprehensive way, and that folks understand what we are doing with those conditions. So I'll take any questions on that before we go to community or public comment.
Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you. Just real quickly, Greg, thank you for that update. I just wanted to reiterate that these conditions, at least the ones that the city put together, did come out of a lot of community engagement and community processes. And to achieve our policy and community objectives for the project, IBR's commitment and approach to addressing the climate crisis and how decisions will be based on equitable outcomes for the people in our region are really, and how those most impacted by freeway construction or expansion. To me, that's kind of the critical frame for all of the conditions that the city provided. And I will say that PBOT is absolutely committed to working with your team. We don't know yet who will be leading transportation at the city of Portland, but PBOT and its staff, they're all in and really ready to help make sure that this project becomes a real leader. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Hardesty. We have been working with city staff to make sure we understand the nuances of those conditions that were submitted. Some of them we already have plans for. We know that there are some issues that we have to make sure we are coordinated statewide on how we address these issues of greenhouse gas production. So it's still a work in process. That's one of several of the issues related to greenhouse gas production and climate are issues that our team, our principal climate officer, is working on with staff from each of the agencies. So we're listening. We are putting together plans around those issues. One last issue that was partner condition, but it's also part of the NEPA process, was the issue of auxiliary lanes. And I hesitate to get into this now because this is a lengthy discussion, but this group does need to know where we are at on this issue. We received partner conditions that were, some were in direct opposition of other partner conditions related to the study of auxiliary lanes. So the IBR team reached out internally to our NEPA experts. We went externally to NEPA experts around the country to understand how we should position ourselves for this discussion on auxiliary lanes. And everyone came to the conclusion that if you do not do the study of auxiliary lanes, the impacts of both 1 and 2, that we would be sent back to another supplemental environmental impact statement to understand those impacts. So we have chosen at this point to incorporate the study of 2 auxiliary lanes into this draft supplemental process. Does not mean we're going to build 2, but it means we need to understand the impacts of 2 auxiliary lanes. So our team is working with staff from your agencies to make that happen, and we will be coming back with more information and letting you know what these studies are telling us as we move forward. But we wanted to take that one risk off of the table by putting this as part of the draft supplemental process to get this work done now rather than deferring it and having to go back and repeat another supplemental. So I'll take any questions or concerns on that issue.
Are there comments, questions, concerns? I do know that it was raised a little bit in some of the preliminary overview statements. Yes, there we go. President Peterson.
You're on mute.
So I was. I appreciate having the dialogue. I think it's part of the risk analysis. I think I understand that. I think our council understands that. I just want to make sure that the political pressures are understood as well. And that that this region as a whole, both sides have come to a decision of what we feel can be built, not what everybody wishes, right? And balancing that with the cost estimates that we now have in hand of anything bigger, it's a true risk to the project. And so I understand the analysis, I understand the rationale you're putting forward. It's being perceived, obviously, by those who have been part of this process, negotiated this outcome, as increasing risk within our ability to stay true to trying to get this across the finish line. So it is a risk, but yeah.
Understood. And as we have told everyone, this is not, we are committing to build anything, but we have to study and know the impacts as part of the NEPA process, or once again, we will get sent back to do this work in the future.
Administrator Johnson, could you speak to the potential schedule impacts of having to do an additional
Excuse
study
me, Millicent,
after?
there's another hand up.
Yes, I see Commissioner Berkman's hand, but I wanted to make sure that there was some reference to that schedule impact that Administrator Johnson spoke to. If we took things not out of sequence, but if we added something to the end of the overall timeline. Thank you, Commissioner Hurst.
So real quick, based on our best assessment, if we did not do this work now and we had to come back and repeat this work, we would be looking at 6 to 9 months of additional time at the end to go back and reduplicate another supplemental environmental impact statement process to address this issue. So that is the risk that we were looking at. And as our financial analysis showed, and where inflation is at, as you start looking at days you cannot get back out in the future, those days are the equivalent of $800,000 per day in inflationary and escalation costs. So we're looking at managing that issue as we move this forward. Once again, it's just the study to understand the impacts that we will put out to the public, so the public and the partners and everyone can see what this means as part of the NEPA process.
Thank you. Now, Commissioner Berkman.
Thank you. And
Thanks
thank
for your
you, Greg, for that description. We certainly understand the pressures, both politically and project-wise, on this issue of auxiliary lanes. Our port's request was to analyze the 1 and 2 auxiliary lanes, which is what you're doing. And I want to be clear too, that we're not in a position of saying it's an all or nothing. There may be something in the middle, which is not a full second auxiliary lane across the entire influence area, but rather in segments. So we do need to understand more of that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any additional comments or questions for Administrator Johnson? Yes, Secretary Millar.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I would be interested in doing this study because one of the things we have to remember, I bring this back to the ESG from time to time, is you cannot solve all the region's problems within the footprint of this project. And the notion of 1 auxiliary lane or 2 auxiliary lanes, what the analysis might show us is, if we are committed to 1, what do we have to do to get there? The DOTs didn't put the traffic on the bridge. Land use decisions on either side of the river put the traffic on the bridge. So continuing to make the kind of decisions we've made is driving the input into the model that's telling us what we need to do or what we should do. I don't believe in models making decisions. People make decisions, but you can certainly have a different outcome putting a whole bunch of single family on one side of a bridge and a whole bunch of big box commercial with no sales tax on the other side of the bridge, and being surprised that there's traffic between those two. Again, let's do the analysis. I think the analysis is the open and transparent and honest thing to do. And let's look at, if, rather than having a model tell us it has to be this big, if we want it to be smaller, what do we have to do to make that happen? And it's not all on myself and Director Strickler and our teams. It's a bigger task. So thanks.
Thank you, Secretary Millar. Administrator Johnson, any final comments on that before we move to public comment?
Once again, we will continue to work with the staff from each of the partner agencies as we are looking at what the performance factors that will exist to evaluate each of these things. And as Secretary Millar mentioned, what other things can be done to mitigate or to address traffic growth in this area. So once again, more to come on this issue.
Thank you, Administrator Johnson. We do have a couple of minutes that I believe we can fit in one more thing that I think is important for us to address in this meeting before we go to public comment, and that is the work that we're doing with permitting. And so I'm going to ask that it's not assistant, is it? Assistant Program Administrator. Okay, I was going to say deputy. Assistant Program Administrator Ray Maybe to jump on and share with us an update about permitting.
Yeah, thanks, Millicent. I'll be brief because I know we want to get to those public comments. The permitting process with the Coast Guard for bridge clearance, we continue to meet regularly with the Coast Guard and recently completed some work and got some feedback from them on river crossing options to really bring forward the work that was done in the previous effort and the previous EIS. All that work on alternatives, we brought that forward with kind of a freshened packaged look. We also did a river crossing or a movable span report to understand the potential costs and impacts of a movable span to help inform also the Coast Guard's process. As we are working with and understanding their preliminary navigation clearance determination, that is their first response to our navigation impact report. They'd identified some users that could be potentially impacted by that bridge height of 116 feet. And so we've engaged those users or that have noted their impacts and had entered into discussions with them around what they think those impacts are and how they can be addressed. And I'd like to say that as we've engaged them, we've heard acknowledgement for the need to replace the bridge, but also acknowledgement of the need to address their businesses as they look at what 116 feet allows for them. So those discussions are ongoing, and I think we'll be very successful. And as you know, in the previous program, we did receive a bridge permit, and it was also supported by agreements that we had with impacted users. So we're looking again to look at those users, understand their impacts, mitigate them through agreement, so we can achieve a bridge permit with the Coast Guard. And so we continue to move forward with them in a very positive way. But I'll stop there and see if there's questions.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. I just got indications as to how many commenters we have. So we have a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions. If there are no questions, okay, we'll move on into the instructions for public comment. The instructions are as follows, and I am apologizing to our ASL interpreter because I'm going to be going really fast. There will be an opportunity to provide brief public input in the meeting today. To submit input after the meeting, email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG Public Comment in the subject line, or call 888-503-6735 and state ESG Public Comment in your message. To make verbal comments, if you've joined by Zoom, click raise hand. If you've joined by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. The facilitator will call on participants. You will receive an unmute request. Please accept it. If you are commenting by phone, dial *6 to unmute. Please provide your name and affiliation. Attendees will be allocated up to 2 minutes for public comment, depending on the number of commenters, up to a total of 10 minutes. If we run out of time and you've not had a chance to speak, you can still provide comments after the meeting. To submit comment after the meeting, please fill out the comment form on the program website or email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG Public Comment in the subject line, or call 888-503-6735 and state ESG Public Comment in your message. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to ESG members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. All comments are posted on the IBR website. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brent Hamlin, who is going to invite our public commenters in and start the clock for each of them. Brent.
One second as I get everything organized here. Yeah, we have Chris Smith.
Good morning. Chris Smith, representing the Just Crossing Alliance. As a reminder, Just Crossing comprises 32 environmental, climate, equity, and environmental justice organizations that are looking for the most sustainable and equitable outcomes from this project. 2 quick notes in the discussion today. Secretary Millar referenced the traffic generated by the difference in tax policies between the 2 states and the tax-free shopping that happens on Hayden Island. I hope that any analysis of auxiliary lanes or other demand factors will look at the reduction in that demand once that trip involves tolls. We believe that some of that shopping traffic is going to go away, and we'd love to understand what the size of that impact is. The other point I'd like to make is about the embedded track question. I've served for almost 2 decades on the board of Portland Streetcar and have lots of experience with embedding track in Portland's streets. A key value of the Alliance is that we be prepared to support much more intense use of transit in the future. I don't think we can predict today how that transit will be configured. So by using embedded track, you can make sure that the transit way is available and accessible to buses. We think value engineering that feature out would be a very, very poor choice at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
And next we have CREDC Clark County.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jennifer Baker with the Columbia River Economic Development Council. Happy to be here today and to be receiving some of the program updates from the IBR. Firstly, I wanted to reaffirm the business community's spirit and support for this event, or for this bridge replacement. Over the last 10 days, we've hosted collectively 2 events. One was a bi-state business partnership event that we co-hosted with the Portland Business Alliance. We had over 110 representatives of the business community all coming out to support the bridge replacement project. And likewise, in alignment with our Southwest Washington partners in business association work, the Greater Vancouver Chamber, CREDC, and Identity Clark County all co-hosted a policy breakfast and legislative affairs breakfast just a week ago. And the #1 infrastructure priority remains the replacement of the interstate bridge. So in our economic development work, I heard mention today of the federal grant opportunities. Certainly from a business development standpoint, we are seeing those opportunities at levels never before. And so I'm really encouraged to hear so much of the commentary from the executive steering group today on being focused in the timing and our aggressiveness towards pursuing those federal funds. So if there are ways that our business community can continue to support, we will seek to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Brent, do we have any other commenters?
Yes, we have 3 more. Bob Ortblad.
Oh, thank you. I'm Bob Ortblad, a Washington resident. I hold a master's in civil engineering from the University of Washington. And for 40 years, I was a professional civil engineer. Please study my many written comments that I've submitted with simple graphics. I think they're very understandable. If built, the LPA will be the most dangerous bridge in the country due to its steep 4% grade, again, the steepest in the country, with curves and weather, severe weather, and icing conditions, famous in Portland. Today I heard aggressive grab for federal dollars for a bad project. Last Monday, Hayden Island Community sponsored a program where the IBR presented its LPA, and I presented an immersed tunnel alternative. There was little support for a bridge and great support for an immersed tunnel alternative. I suggest you read the Columbia's reporting on this meeting. The LPA is referred to as locally preferred alternative. I think it's only preferred by the bureaucracy, not by most citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ortblatt.
And next we have Sean Philbrook.
Members of the ESG, Sean Philbrook, Vice President of Programs for the Business Leaders Group Identity, Clark County. I'm here today to provide some additional context to the Clark County Transportation Alliance policy statement, which Matt Ransom mentioned earlier. This is a 20-year-old effort bringing together disparate priorities into one unified agenda, advocating for local transportation and infrastructure investments. We'll provide the document after the meeting via email to the program team, as was recommended here. This year, I'm pleased to share that we have more than 60 groups endorsing that effort, including cities, ports, freight, transit, labor, healthcare, education, and many other groups. By supporting this effort, each of these organizations is declaring with a loud voice that replacement of the I-5 bridge is the #1 transportation need in our region. And while the Alliance specifically advocates for projects in Southwest Washington, we have an increasing number of endorsing groups from Oregon. These groups recognize that our transportation system doesn't stop at state lines, and neither should our partnerships. We need both banks of the river to be fully funded and functional. Speaking of funding, we understand that the recent bridge replacement cost estimate is higher than some expected. However, it was noted during this meeting today, the bridge will never get cheaper. That's why we're supportive of the project team moving swiftly, advancing their efforts, and ensuring timely delivery of this critical project. We're also delighted to hear that the project team is studying additional auxiliary lane scenarios. We need greater capacity, whatever that might look like, especially for our high, wide, and heavy freight to reach its intended destinations, like lengthy wind turbine blades delivered through the Port of Vancouver and trucked up the gorge to generate renewable energy for our residents and employers. As we wrap up another year, we thank each of you for your hard work in this group and on the project, and look forward to 2023, another step closer to a safe, seismically resilient, and reliable I-5 bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philbrook. Our next commenter.
Be John. Sorry, John, accidentally lowered your hand earlier.
That's all right. Good evening, council members. John Lee, Clark County. I am amazed that after 3 years and the expenditure of tens of millions of dollars, we still only have a conceptual design, and we have failed to resolve the one problem people want fixed. That's reducing traffic congestion and saving time. We are now talking spending $5 to $7.5 billion, and travel times will double for the morning southbound commute. After the expenditure of $5 to $7.5 billion, fully 50% of rush hour traffic will be stuck going 0 to 20 miles an hour. What an absolute waste,
No business is going to bring their business here to the Portland metro area when they understand half of rush hour traffic is going to be stuck going 0 to 20 miles an hour. What a sad waste. Finally, there is no need for high capacity mass transit. Roger Millar's WashDOT mobility dashboard recently revealed the truth on I-5. 0.4%, a rounding error, of all people and traffic on the Interstate 5 bridge are on buses. Less than 1,000 people a day have any desire to use transit across the river. CTran's own next 5-year study says they only expect traffic on their mass transit system to recover to 75% of pre-pandemic levels. TriMet similarly says, at best, transit ridership will recover by 2027. There is no demand. We can build this now for vehicles and freight, and later on, when there is demand, we can add transit later.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Are there any more public comments?
There's no more commenters signed up at this time, Millicent.
All right, great. Thank you, Brent. So we are now at the end of our meeting. We have just a couple of minutes. I'd ask if there are any final comments from our program administrator. But before doing so, I will mention we have acknowledged that there are a few things that the ESG members have asked that the team go back and provide additional introspection and explanation on. And so we will be working to ensure that we provide that. I also, in the last ESG meeting, mentioned that we would likely have our next ESG meeting in February. After thinking about the number of things that will be going on over the course of the next couple of months, it has been determined that we're going to look at some other alternatives, potentially in March for the next ESG meeting. So I'll be reaching out to all of your admins to determine your availability. That is probably the most fun that I have, trying to find a day.
On the getting through the most important part of the meeting, which was the explanation of the estimate and the estimating process. There will be more to come. This is not just a one-time thing that we do. We're going to be continually looking to refine costs and to make sure we are staying in budget. But the key takeaway from this is that time is money. Time is not our friend on this issue if we want to keep this thing moving forward. So we're going to be working to make sure we're staying on track, on schedule. So once again, thanks everybody for your attention and your input. And we hope to see this group again in March. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays, everybody.